Pope Francis put out a document called The Joy of the Gospel. And in it, he called for us to become missionary disciples. Well, many people were kind of perplexed and saying, what exactly is a missionary disciple? And since I've been seeking to be a missionary disciple for 25 years and have been applying this into my ministry, I thought, here's a chance for me to explain what I've been living all these years. So this comes from Luke chapter 10, where Jesus sent the 72 others out. So these were not the apostles. Later on, there would be deacons. It was neither the apostles nor the deacons, but these were ordinary followers of Christ. In other words, today we would say these 72 others are the lay people, and they're meant to become missionary disciples. So what is Pope Francis thinking of in this? Well, in the early church, Jesus had commissioned all the church to become missionary disciples. To me, it means two simple things. A disciple is a follower of Jesus. We learn to imitate Jesus. And a missionary is someone on a mission. So what exactly is a missionary disciple? What does that look like in your everyday life? Well, there was this guy named Thayer Wade that I was in a Men of St. Joseph group with. This was a Catholic men's ministry, and we were trying to find out what exactly is our mission. So Thayer told the story about how he went on a retreat to a Jesuit retreat center, and the priest met with him, and he spent some time reflecting, and he came to say that from that retreat he found that he had three missions. One was to get himself to heaven. Two was to influence his family to go on the path to heaven. And three, as many others as possible. So we in the Men of St. Joseph adopted this plan of this is our mission, to get ourselves to heaven, our families, and then as many others as possible. So when we would meet with the other men in our men's groups, we knew that this was our opportunity to be able to influence others. So we were working on this to become missionary disciples. So this spread throughout New Hampshire. We had 25 to 30 parishes around the state that were starting these groups, and they were really about becoming missionary disciples. Even to this day, that was 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago, even to this day, 500 men will gather every year on the Feast of St. Joseph. They're holding on to this vision. Well, it would spread throughout New England because the bishops of New England wanted to have a Catholic men's ministry, so we brought it for 3 years. We held conferences, and it spread to Worcester, it spread to Springfield, and a leader in Providence, Rhode Island began it. So this Catholic men's ministry began to grow. And this leader in Rhode Island, Don Turbot, then was involved with international missionary efforts, and he started bringing the Men of St. Joseph to Eastern Europe, to Vietnam and the Far East, to Central America. And so the Men of St. Joseph started to spread around the world. It's now in 14 countries. So this little thing of starting just with 3 basic missions has become really helpful to men all over the world and is continuing to spread. Another example of missionary discipleship would be through the Come Follow Me discipleship training. After I had worked with the Men of St. Joseph and we put together some simple promises, I really tried to focus down on 10 things that Jesus taught his disciples that would really cover essentials. So we recognize that number 1 is that we have to abide in the Lord. Discipleship is actually impossible. It's impossible to be like Jesus. We have to learn how to do it in Him. So what exactly does that mean to abide in the Lord, as we hear about in John 15 with the vine and the branches? In the early church, they did it in 4 ways. In Acts 2:42, it says they devoted themselves to the apostles' instruction, the fellowship, the breaking of bread, and prayer. So these foundational elements became part of this Come Follow Me approach. So the apostles' instruction were the teachings of Jesus. We see that in the Gospels and the New Testament. The fellowship was the gathering of Christians together where they learned from each other and they built each other up. They supported each other. The breaking of bread, St. Paul in 1 Corinthians 11 talks about this is communion. This is a celebration of the Lord's Day. So that coming together as church is a third thing. And a fourth would be prayer. So that prayer life really connects us with the Lord. So these 4 were essential foundations for becoming disciples in the early church. So abiding in the Lord through these four things, there's 5 essentials of following Jesus. And this led to the mission. And the mission is to go and make disciples of all nations. So we have to be disciples, and then we make disciples. That will be a 6th essential. You do this first in your family. How can you bring your family to faith? How do you share your faith in your everyday life in your family? We had family devotions. My children were learning how to do these 10 things right in our family life. An 8th thing would be to do it in your parish. It says that prepare God's people for works of service so the body of Christ might be built up. So in our churches, we all have gifts, and we're supposed to use our gifts to build up the church. Then how about our everyday life? Number 9 is to share our faith in our everyday life. And so as we learn how to be a witness, always be prepared to give an answer to those who ask you. So that's from 1 Peter chapter 3. We have to be always ready to speak about our faith if someone asks. And we need to be a witness in our everyday lives. Finally, the 10th one is to answer God's call for our life. We have all a particular calling. So we give our lives to the Lord and carry out His purposes. So these 10 essentials were developed to become missionary disciples. And I put it together in a little booklet. And so this booklet helped to really identify, either as a personal devotion or as a small group devotion, these 10 essentials. So in 2013, I brought this with me when my friend Paul Katarum in Uganda invited me to come. They had spread Alpha to 18 parishes. Paul was involved he had a school that he had founded for orphans and poor children. And so when I introduced this to the leaders of that diocese, there were priests, religious sisters, lay leaders. I spoke to them for 2 hours, just simple ways that I had taught my children to be missionary disciples. And so after they had listened for 2 hours and these simple 10 things, they decided they wanted to do it in their diocese. So Paul got together a group of people, and every weekend they would go out and they would train people. By that Christmas, the following Christmas, that was about 6-7 months later, they had over 2,000 people trained. A year and a half later, they had 9,982 people trained to be missionary disciples. So I've had these opportunities that if we just begin to do what Jesus did, He wants to spread this. And I'll end with, in Mark chapter 4, He said the seed that falls on good ground produces 30, 60, 100-fold. So with these 2 examples, the Men of St. Joseph spreading to 14 countries, and Come Follow Me leadership training and discipleship it's been translated into 4 languages, and more than 10,000 people in Uganda alone are being impacted. So if we just, in practical ways, just focus on what Jesus taught us, there can be great things that He wants to do with us.